Kilmar Abrego Garcia has been returned to the United States from El Salvador, and I know that the story is actually a really mixed bag, but I think that there are some important takeaways here. I think there are some really positive things here, even if right now the end result for Mr. Abrego Garcia is not yet freedom. Pam Bondi, the Department of Justice, Donald Trump, and El Salvador's autocratic ruler Bukele have all said it wasn't possible for them to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia from the CCOT torture prison where he was wrongfully deported, renditioned back to the United States. Kilmar's case really grabbed national headlines because there was an existing court order that said he was not to be returned to El Salvador. And the Department of Justice admitted that they had wrongfully sent him there. They admitted they had violated that court order. They were like, our bad, but there's nothing we can do to bring him back. So this has been an ongoing habeas corpus issue. The judge in the case has been demanding from the Department of Justice, why have you not followed the Supreme Court's ruling that you have to work to facilitate Kilmar's return? And we saw the Department of Justice disrespecting the court over and over again, filing their required updates very, very late, or filing updates that were riddled with errors, or filing updates that basically said, like, nothing, we aren't doing anything to comply with the court's ruling. And this has been really scary for us in the United States because that's a constitutional crisis, right? The executive branch is brazenly outright saying, we will not comply with a ruling from the Supreme Court or from the lower courts who are now in charge of handling that case. We know this is your ruling. We admit we broke the law. We're not going to fix it. And you go ahead and try and make us. That's a really scary time. The rule of law completely breaks down. The courts are known as kind of the weakest branch of our government, and they don't have a strong way to enforce their rulings if the Department of Justice is willfully disobeying the law. Rightly concerning. I was freaking out about it. I'm still very, very concerned that this Department of Justice and this regime are constantly trying to see if they can get away with breaking the law and ignoring the courts. But the judge in the case, she really held the line. She consistently said, I'm not going to back down. The law has to be upheld. And initially, Pam Bondi said, well, if we even could bring him, we can't bring him back, but even if we could bring him back, we would just immediately deport him to another country. To which the judge here was like, why would you do that? There's not really any grounds to deport him. So there was this big show from the Department of Justice of like, we're going to test the waters here and see if we ignore the court, if they'll eventually back down, if they'll just let us have our way. Because this is what autocratic regimes do, right? This is what Donald Trump and other bullies like him do, is that they push and push and push. They bully and intimidate you. They refuse to comply. And then they say, make me do the thing. If I'm breaking the rules, you go ahead and make me try and follow them. But there have been other cases where wrongfully deported immigrants have been returned to the case. There was one just a day or two ago where a man who goes by his initials was returned to the U.S., a Guatemalan that was wrongfully deported to Mexico. But this regime really, really wanted to make a show of not bringing back anybody from the torture gulag in El Salvador, because ultimately their goal is to send everybody there, including American citizens, right? Donald Trump said to Bukele, why don't you build 6 more of these and we can put American citizens in them? I know that a lot of things have happened between when he said that and today, but we need to all remember the threat from this regime is to take American citizens and put them in a torture prison, disappear them to a torture prison or series of torture prisons in El Salvador. The torture prison where the director has said the only way you leave here is in a coffin. So this really was a goal of this regime, to set up these concentration/death camps in other countries where we couldn't touch these people. We couldn't protect them. We couldn't bring them back, where their rights could be violated and their lives taken from them. So they didn't want to give this up easily. But today they had to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and they did. They brought him back to the States today. So I want you to understand the rule of law did hold here. The Department of Justice, they buckled. They played chicken with the court, and they ultimately backed down. Now, they don't like that. They're real pissy. So there's going to be that narcissistic rage lash out, right? They don't want the rule of law to win. They don't want to look like the losers that they are. And they definitely want to punish Kilmar. And they definitely want to send a message to anybody else that getting brought back to the United States does not mean that you have your freedom. It doesn't mean that you won. Because what they've done now is they've charged Kilmar. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but from reading what other lawyers were saying on Blue Sky and listening to Harry Litman's breakdown of the case, They're basically charging him with conspiracy because it appears that allegedly he drove some immigrants from Texas to another state. And that maybe potentially when he did that, there were other folks doing the same thing, and that they were all working for one guy. And that then creates a conspiracy where that guy ran a decade's worth of shuttling migrants from state to state. And so under the law, if you are part of a conspiracy, you are legally liable for everything that happened in that conspiracy, even if you didn't actually do it. So it looks like maybe potentially Kilmar drove some migrants from Texas to another state, and he is going to be charged with everything everybody did in that conspiracy. The DOJ is determined to make an example out of him. Not just to make an example out of him, but they are trying to save face. They are trying to still maintain their posture as the bullies who can do whatever they want, as the bullies who can ruin immigrants' lives. They are trying to maintain that aggressive stance that we will punish you, we will intimidate you. Our goal is a reign of terror. Our goal is cruelty. Our goal is to ruin your life. So Kilmar is back in the States. He is in ICE custody, and he is potentially facing these federal charges. Obviously, I don't care what Pam Bondi says. The Constitution says he is innocent until proven guilty. Either way, he never should have been sent from the United States to the torture gulag in El Salvador. The Department of Justice admits as much, and the rule of law said you have to bring him back, and they did have to bring him back. They're just going to have a little shit fit about it now. They want to discourage anybody else from trying to get justice, but please understand there's almost 300 men who have been charged with nothing, Venezuelan men sitting in that torture prison right now, and they all need to come back. They all deserve freedom. And also, let us not forget, they are sending flights of migrants. Avelo Airlines is sending flights of migrants out of this country to places all over the world. Please let's not forget that at least 8 men who have been charged with no crimes and are from Asian countries and Mexico were flown and dumped in South Sudan. Their constitutional rights, their due process rights were violated. A judge has already said as much. And they were dumped into a war zone, a place where we American citizens are encouraged not to travel because it's so dangerous. There's a travel warning for us not to go there. But this regime wants to inflict terror on our migrants. And so it sent them to a place where their lives are at risk, where they are at high risk of being beaten, sexually assaulted, or killed, where trafficking of migrants is very common, a place where these men don't speak the language. They're not from that continent at all. They have no connections, no ability to get a job. We just dumped them there. How is that any different than a death sentence? It's unconscionable on so many levels. So please understand that all of that is still happening, and the courts need to keep pursuing justice. And I'm just going to add here, the people need to be making sure that we get accountability for corporations who are making tons of money off of this, like Avelo Airlines that is flying these flights of migrants. They're taking millions of our tax dollars. They're getting rich off of ruining the lives of men who've been charged with no crimes, with men who are having their due process rights violated. They're taking our tax money to do that and getting very wealthy. So I think today there is something to celebrate here. Any marginal victory, any win that we can get against this regime is really important to focus on and hold on to, and to not wave away and ignore, because every single win is important. This win outraged Trump. It outraged the Department of Justice, and that's why they are lashing out so hard at Kilmar right now. They didn't get their way. They had to bring him back. They lied to you and me and everybody when they said that they could. They lied to the court when they said they couldn't bring him back, because guess what? When it was looking like contempt charges were going to come roll out, when it was looking like fines were going to be laid down, when it was looking like some people would have to sit in jail under contempt, then suddenly they were able to effectuate his return. So I know it's not ideal. I know that this regime is going to constantly see what are the avenues through which they can terrorize our migrants, and we are going to have to hold them accountable every step of the way. We cannot give up, and we must celebrate any victory. Anytime the rule of law holds, it's really important right now. So Kilmar is back in the States, and I hope that his family gets to see him. I hope that his lawyers are able to visit with him, and I hope that he gets due process for what comes next.